Hello, my name is Abby Linville, and today I'm going to be sharing with you about People First Language. People First Language is something that is essential to creating a culture in your school that is supportive of all individuals. So please listen closely and keep an open mind when it comes to making this transition into using People First Language as a part of your everyday life. So, 61 million. That's a large number. There are 61 million adults that report having some form of disability in our country today. That number comes from the CDC, and it equals out to about 1 in 4 adults identify as having some form of disability. People with disabilities are our nation's largest minority group. Not only is it the largest minority group, but it's also the most diverse group. Within that group of people that have disabilities, there are all ages, all genders, all religions, ethnicities, and socioeconomic groups represented. So I think it's about time that we start to make a change that helps promote respect and dignity for those who have disabilities. So let's talk about what is People First Language. So People First Language is the language that's used to appropriately and respectfully communicate with and about an individual with a disability. It emphasizes the person first and not their disability. And it's not just about being politically correct, it's about showing people that you respect and value them. So instead of saying that a Down syndrome person, you would say a person who has Down syndrome. That's an example of People First Language. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into it throughout the presentation. So let's talk about why is People First Language important. Well, it shows people that you value and respect them as an individual, that you see them as a person first and not just as their disability. Also, it can change the way that you see the person and the way they see themselves. If you see someone just as their disability, you might set lower expectations for them. And that's not fair because they have more abilities than that. And we want to make sure that we are expecting the best from everyone. And we really want to make sure that our attitude and language help drive our actions and that our actions reflect what our attitude and language say. So that means that we want to make sure that we are using language that is supportive of all of our students and match what we want for them. So let's look at some language that we are currently using. So some of these are not used by everyone, but are terms that I have heard often. Some are like, she is confined to a wheelchair. He is disabled. She's a sped kid. He is nonverbal. That's the handicap spot. She is a nut. Let's look a little closer at this language and come up with some terms that we could use instead. So let's look at the term, she is confined to a wheelchair. That term is focusing on a person's ability and not about who they are. So they're not someone that's confined in a negative way to their wheelchair. It's a person who uses a wheelchair to make things accessible to them. You also want to make sure that you're not using language that shows or like emphasizes that they have a lack of something. So if you're saying he is disabled, it's saying it in a negative kind of tone instead of saying it's just he's a person first who happens to have a disability. Same with he's autistic. You're labeling them and making it seem like their diagnosis is who they are instead of just saying he has autism and then going forward with the things that he can do. You also want to make sure that you're avoiding any offensive language. So let's look at the term, she is a nut. She is a nut is a derogatory term that people would use to describe someone who is overly emotional. So instead of saying, oh, she's a nut, or she is crazy, you would say she is a person with an emotional disability. It kind of takes away that stereotype and that negative connotation that goes with it. When we look at the term, that is the handicap spot, that really focuses on someone as being handicapped, which is a term that is very outdated. We really want to talk about how that spot is making it accessible for someone. So instead of using that as the handicap spot, you would use the term accessible parking. Really, I think the overall goal of all of these language types is to make sure that you are using terms in a positive way and that you are focusing on the person first. I think the most used term for us is she's a sped kid. I often hear people talk about she's a sped kid, he's a sped kid, that's a sped kiddo. We really want to make sure that we're not labeling a kid as a sped kid, that we're talking about that they have it's something that they have or something that they need or something that they're receiving. So she is a person who is receiving special education services instead of labeling her as a SPED kid. Here are some other things that I think are important to avoid. Sometimes we, well-meaningfully, try to portray people with a disability as being inspirational and saying, oh, look at what they've overcome and look what they have done. What that does is it makes it seem like they are only inspirational because they have this disability, and that disability is negative and something that they must overcome, instead of just saying that person is successful or they're a very productive person. You want to make sure that you aren't just saying they're inspirational out of pity, because that negative connotation is not kind, and it is not something that makes a person who has a disability feel good. You also want to avoid saying terms like normal people. When you use the term normal people, you're making it people who have disabilities feel as if they are not normal. So instead of saying normal people, you would say that they are a person without disabilities. You also want to avoid really outdated terms like cripple, slow, jerk, or retard. Those terms all carry a very negative connotation and are often used as a term to insult someone else. And with that insult makes people feel like if you're using that term to insult them and it's also used as a word to describe me, that is how you view me as well. And we want to make sure that all of our students with disabilities know that we see them in a very positive way, in a positive life, and our positive way and positive light. You also want to make sure that you're using the term has and not suffers from. Suffers from, again, carries that negative connotation, and we want to make sure that we are being positive. So here is the People First Language Pledge. I would highly suggest that all of you look over this pledge and read this pledge and make a commitment to this pledge, because I know that all of you want to make sure that we are creating a culture that welcomes all individuals in our building, and that includes individuals who have disabilities. I highly suggest that you read this over and make this pledge so that we can make sure that all of the students in our school feel supported. I want to leave you with this quote from Kathy Snow, who is a parent of a student with a disability and advocates for people with disabilities. And here is the quote: "A person with a disability is more like people without disabilities than different. A disability does not define a person. There's a lot more to that person than that. So please make sure that you are using people first language that values the person as an individual and celebrates who they are." Thank you so much for listening, and I want to share my references with you. Have a good day.